Well, hey, Accelerated Geography freshmen, Mr. Abasian here. Today we're going to talk about Imperial motives, the mini essay, how you're going to go about setting that up and writing this out. So right now I need you to get out your notebook, open up to your European motives chart that you have completed with the questions on the back that dealt with your three primary sources, the white man's burden, the Methodist school, and the video you watched on the Olympics with the pre and post industrialized England. I'm going to also ask you to take out your blue packet with your practice with your thesis statements. Once you get the blue packet and you get your notebook, I'm also going to ask you to take out either a blank sheet of paper to take a few notes while I talk, or if you have the sheet of paper that either I handed out in class or was given to you or you printed out, I want this piece of paper out here too, as you can be writing through as we break down prompt questions, thesis setup, argumentative body paragraphs, and talking through this. Okay, so what is my actual essay, my mini essay, going to be about? Well, here's your prompt question. What I'd like you to do is you could take a pen, and the very first thing once you're given a prompt question is to break it down. This is what I do with my AP students, and so we're going to break it down here, writing on a couple of areas to make sure we understand it. Let's read it first. Europeans colonized the African continent primarily to spread Christian beliefs rather than for economic resources and racial superiority between 1880 to 1960. Okay, if that's the case that's here, I want to make sure that I break down the correct part. So as I'm reading through, one of the first words that sticks out to me is this, primarily. Now, with primarily that's here, what I interpret that to be is another word for main. What is the main reason Europeans colonized the African continent? Now, according to this prompt, it says to spread Christian beliefs. Okay, Bayesian, where are you getting Christian beliefs from? Well, exactly what you saw in your chart that's here under religion. That's what you took a look at the Methodist Sunday school class, and even the image that we discussed in class with what happened before European missionaries and after European missionaries that are here. So we want to know, the prompt is taking a side. It's argumentative. So it's Christian beliefs were primarily the cause or the reason why Europeans came. How do I know it's argumentative? This key word right here, rather. This rather part makes it argumentative in nature. And so with that, you now have a choice. Is it Christian beliefs, or are you going to argue that it's actually more racial superiority or resources that are here? Now, if we're talking about resources, this is where you're using that information from pre- and post-industrialized England. Yet if you're using racial superiority, it's some of the arguments that were made with White Man's Burden, with the Rudyard Kipling poem that we talked about, and the Pear Soaps ad that we took a look at in class as well. All of these are great sources to help you out in talking about which was the bigger main force here. Now, there's a couple of key words to identify that's here. How I know? Well, support. The support part basically means that I would take the belief that Christian beliefs were the number one reason or the main reason why Europeans came. That means I would support that statement. My entire essay I'm writing is going to support it. If I get the refute part, another word for refute is going to be the fact that you're against it or you disagree with that statement. And so in that case, you would probably be arguing the resource part or the racial superiority as being better, a better reason why Europeans came over to colonize Africa. The modify one basically means that you're not making up your own prompt and you're not undecided. It just means that you don't believe that Christian beliefs, resources, racial superiority really cuts it, and that there's another category you want to put in there. Doesn't mean you change the prompt or anything. It just means that these categories are a little bit more switched up. Now, the other key part is to notice that you've got from 1880 to 1960. That's here. That's the time frame. If you end up going back to your African timeline, and I want you to look at it, it's on the previous page, you'll notice European colonization happened during that time. So you really can't talk about independence that came afterwards, nor can you really talk about the anything that happened before the 1880s. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let me get this out for you real quick. I have got my timeline here. Whoop. And you'll notice African independence that's here is from 1957 to present, but European colonialism is from 1880 to 1960s. So you're going to be focusing primarily here, but nothing before it, and really not too much after. You can talk about the beginning part of the independence movement, because that goes into the 1960s that are here, but nothing about like current day Africa today, because that wouldn't match with the prompt. Okay, where am I getting this? I've got my Africa Mapping Lab, my notebook, my Chapter 20, Section 1, and my Imperial Motives chart. Awesome. Okay, Bayesian, that's how you break down the prompt. So let's take a look at the bigger picture here. This isn't a full essay. In class so far, we have talked about the body paragraphs and the thesis, but we really haven't talked about intro and conclusion yet. We'll get there. For now, the only thing that I want you worried about in this case is your thesis statement and one body paragraph that you're going to be writing for this assignment that's here. Now, there's a couple of things that we want to set up. First of all, thesis statement that's here. Keep in mind, your thesis statement are 2 sentences that tells what your essay or paper is all about. It's got to be specific, should provide examples, should be a clear argument, and does it pass the so what test? With that, here's how your thesis setup should look like. Despite, while, or although, a counter argument, your argument, and then a therefore roadmap. Okay, now before I go ahead and explain this, I want you to go over to your blue packet that's here, and I want you to take a reread through the criteria that we covered earlier this year for a thesis statement. Is it an arguable conclusion? Is the assertion more than simply your opinion? Can you actually back it up and give me a because? Is it specific rather than vague? Does it give the reader a roadmap to your arguments? When we come back to roadmaps here, that's why I add that second sentence here so that you can explain to the reader where you're going. And finally, it's also got to be written in third person, no I or me. So here's what I'd like. If you are watching this video, I actually have a practice part that I want you to do. I'd like you to write good beside the ones that meet all the criteria for a good thesis statement, and next to the ones that don't, I want you to write a bad, just the word bad. And you can even write down the letters of the criteria the statement does not meet. Do 1 through 10 for me, taking a look at the criteria that's here. Make sure to pause this video at this point right now, complete the good or bad part on your blue packet to help you identify strong thesis statements, and then unpause this video, and I'm going to give you some answers here. All right, you're back with me. Hopefully you've had a chance to go through good or bad, wrote some of your criteria. Let's go through these and I'll give you some answers. Number 1, that's a bad one. Here's why. They don't assert more than just an opinion. There's also nothing specific to really back it up, nor do they give a roadmap here. They also use a third person I. 2, that's a good one. Notice the key word that's here, because. That's a key part that's there because they're going and giving an explanation of why they believe that. 3, it is cruel to release marine animals born and raised in captivity because they lack the foyage, the defensive and social skills. Yes, absolutely, that's a good one. 4, exploitation of animals by the entertainment industry is wrong, so they took a stance. And I think it should be stopped. That's a bad one. I don't like the I statement. It's just their opinion. They don't give any reason, so B is a key criteria that's there. 5, looks good. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 don't work. In fact, these are all bad ones. Breeding programs in zoos are valuable. Yes, they took a stance, but again, they don't explain it. Some animals that are rare in the wild are fairly common in zoos. That's a statement, but it's not arguable. Animal abuse is cruel to animals, same things as 6. There's no reason to back it up. I heard that some poachers kill in order to capture the babies to sell to zoos. Again, no I statement. Lots of people think zoos accomplish many valuable goals, but again, it doesn't give me a roadmap. If you feel pretty confident with these criteria, great, let's move on. If not, this is a time for you to pause it, go back through, taking a read through the criteria, and you can even find me and ask me questions during break, lunch, or through email that's here. But for now, let's get back to our thesis statement. We're going to take all those parts of criteria and we're going to develop a thesis. Now, we identified the fact that it is an argumentative prompt. So now in my thesis, I've got to provide a counter argument. So I want to make sure I recognize the opposite end and then give my argument here along with a roadmap. So let's say that I believe in Christianity beliefs being the #1 reason. I would then probably say resources, racial superiority, and I'd give what people would argue would be their #1. Then I would give my argument with Christian beliefs and why, and then give a therefore explaining what the rest of my essay is going to be about and the reasons I'm going to jump in. Let me give you an example. For globalization, we did this prompt a couple of months back in Unit 2 with globalization. Does globalization cause more positive change in buying products throughout the world? Do you support, modify, or refute this statement? Let's say I refute it. I don't like it at all. So here's what I'm going to do. I use the word despite, okay? Despite, and now I'm going to give the counter. Since I believe that there are no positive changes, I'm going to give the counter argument of why people would say positive. Despite cheap products produced from t-shirt factories in Bangladesh, more harm comes from the work due to unsafe working conditions in the factories. Notice that comma, that's the counter, and then I argue my side, more harm. So I'm refuting that, and then I give a reason why. The therefore statement follows that, and that's going to give me a roadmap with what the rest of the paragraph, or the rest of my essay is going to be about, especially talking about how this is all going to fit together and the reasons why I feel like there's more harm. You're going to do something very similar with your thesis statement with this prompt question here. Use any one of the 3 words that you have here, therefore, to give you a roadmap. Use these sentence starters, as this is what I use with my AP students, to get them to give very complex and sophisticated thesis arguments that are at least 2 sentences. Now, once I've done the thesis, I'm going to move on to my body paragraph with iced tea. You're familiar with iced tea, but there's a change now. Iced tea introduces your reason or claim, right? So I've given my argument. I'm giving 3 chunks still with a citation and an elaboration, citation and elaboration. So I can pick those off of my resources that I've got that are here to help me out with it. But in this case, the last chunk is actually a counter-argument chunk. Since I have now mentioned it in my thesis, I have to address it in my body paragraph because everything mentioned in the thesis has to come back into my body paragraph or it doesn't match. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this sentence starter. Some people would argue and then give the opposite argument for your point with the evidence that they would have said, and then say the word however. That would be your counter argument and elaboration. Just like you did with our philosophical chairs debate, where you, and your Socratic seminar debate, where you literally had to repeat what somebody said before giving your argument. It's the same thing, but you're doing it in writing here for your counter argument chunk. Make sure you transition in your next paragraph to wrap it up, and that is going to give you your argumentative body paragraph with iced tea. So, to recap, prompt question, you broke it down. Thesis setup is going to look much like this, along with making sure you hit all of the criteria that's here. And then finally, you're going to give your argumentative body paragraph that's going to be supported and should be able to draw arrows to support back to your thesis statement here, with obviously your last sentence being a transition or close. Now, I would like to see this as your first draft, giving me your thesis and your one body paragraph. Type double space because we're going to be adding on to this in the next couple of blocks, where we're going to go from just the body paragraph and thesis statement here to then adding on an intro and a close. The reason why it's called a mini essay, by the way, is that instead of doing 2 body paragraphs, you're just doing 1. But for now, what you're turning in next time in class, if you're watching this, is your thesis and your body paragraph. As always, if you have questions, let me know. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.